Paranormal M is your gateway to the thrilling tales and haunting mysteries. Don't forget to hit subscribe, tap the bell for weekly updates. The eerie and extraordinary are waiting for you. I want you guys to read it and tell me whether it was my paranoia or a ghost. This happened back in 2021. It was during COVID. My little sister, my grandfather, and I all had COVID. So we were sent to a COVID center. The center was a government-owned building, recently built to be a nurse training center. However, due to the pandemic, they had to postpone the opening. My sister and I shared a room, while my grandfather was placed in a separate room for special care since he was elderly. We stayed there for about a week. The building was surrounded by trees. There were no houses nearby. All in all, it was pretty isolated. The first night, I didn't notice anything unusual. The second night was the same. Just a boring day and a boring night. Since our room had a window facing the corridor, I could see the moonlight shining through it while I lay in bed. Occasionally, I'd see people walking by, their shadows flickering through the window. I wasn't much of a socializer, so I didn't bother to interact. I figured they were just going to use the shared restroom. The restroom was small, like a public toilet, only 2 stalls. On the third night around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. Still half asleep, I stumbled my way to the toilet. When I got there, I heard the sound of water running from inside. Assuming somebody was using it, I waited. But even after 10 minutes, the water was still running. There were no other sounds. There was no voices, no phone noises. There was nothing. It felt strange because you'd usually hear something when people were inside. I was on the verge of peeing myself, so I knocked on the door and said, I really have to pee. You almost done? Yet there was no reply. I knocked again, but this time the running water stopped. Both stalls fell silent. I expected someone to come out, but no one did. The silence was unsettling. I knocked once more, and to my surprise, the locked stall door swung open from the force of my knock, and inside it was pitch dark. No one was there. And weirdly enough, I wasn't scared. I just really had to pee. I quickly went inside, and as I relieved myself, I kept thinking about how clearly I had heard the sound of water running into a bucket. But now the bucket was completely empty. The floor was dry, no sign of water. I felt ridiculous, angry even, for wasting over 10 minutes waiting for no one. After I was done, I went back to my room and fell asleep. Maybe it was because I was still half asleep, I just kind of wound up brushing it off. After we get out from the COVID center, I was sharing how I spend my days at the COVID center to my friends and family. I remember that night, so I told them. Some said it must be a ghost, and some said it was just my mind playing a trick on me. What do you think it was? Growing up in a haunted house. My house became haunted ever since it was built. So it wasn't the house, it was the land. And it was a pretty big property, around 8 canals, or kennels? 40,000 square feet roughly. Around it was just fields. In the radius of around 1 kilometer, there was no population. There were around 6 or 7 people who worked on our property full-time to maintain it, and every single one of them had a story to tell. So, when the house was being built, construction workers used to see this weird animal who looked like a rabbit And when you went to catch it, it would turn into a rapper and fly away in the air or just vanish. Yes, a rapper. That animal would suddenly turn into an object and then vanish. This story has been told to me in 3 different people over the years, actually. When me and my siblings were little, my mother used to hear jingling of anklets at night. My father was always away on business trips, and helpers were not allowed inside the residential property. So we used to be alone. There was no one inside the house, and the jingling sounds and sounds of people running around in the lounge were always heard. Things took a major turn when we grew older. One time, a maid suddenly came over to my mother and said, "Yes, ma'am, what is it?" My mother gave her a confused look and she said, "You called for me." My mother never did. She told her that you were standing on the stairs staring at me, and when I asked, "Do you want anything, ma'am?" you just gestured me with your hand to come to you. I completed my work and came. When my mother told her that I didn't call you, I was in my room the whole time and her face literally turned pale as bone. Another time I was alone in my home and I heard a door opening and then closing. Imagine those doors that have door closer on them and are made of wood. They make a big sound when they're closed. When I heard it, I went downstairs to check and the door was closed. Everything was normal. Thought maybe it's the air, which is sus because air can't open a wooden door, but that was just me coping. I closed all the windows shut so there's no air coming from anywhere and went up. The moment I was on my last step, I again heard the sound of door opening and then closing. Now I was beginning to realize this is some Jinn type shit. I just stood there for a minute, but again went downstairs anyway. I was in the middle of the stairs and I saw that the door was just hanging in between, like not closed, but not open. That was impossible as the door had a door closer on it, and who the heck would have opened it? All the doors and windows were locked. No human, no air. I just stood there a bit frozen and taken aback. I looked at that door for like 5 seconds, then boom, closed itself with a bang. Like a person just shut the door handle. Just ran upstairs, increased the volume of the TV so I won't hear this shit any longer. One time I was awoken by a large banging sound, like someone is banging the door very hard. Sounds coming from the lounge, which was a bit far from my room. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. maybe. I went to check on it, and I was surprised that why isn't anyone else woken up? As the sound is very loud, but I didn't give it much thought. When I reached the door, I was so shocked. The sound was coming from behind the door, as if somebody was banging on it. But as loud as the sound was, the door was not vibrating. It was still again. I stood there. I was thinking, what the hell is happening? I was convinced it was a thief or something. So I peeked through that window that was beside the door, and there was no one there. The sound was still coming, but there was no one behind the door. It was a very strange experience. But as I told that, I was experiencing these things since childhood. I just turned, went back to my room to sleep. There was this one thing that used to happen regularly, whenever one of us was sleeping alone in a room at night. They used to pull the toe off our foot, and I swear to God this happened too many times. I lost count. Another thing that usually happened to my mother was that she was slapped on her leg. Even if we were in the room, she would wake up and angrily ask, "Did you just slap me?" I'll sit there clueless, and then we'll just both give each other that knowing look and go back to our work. And the most strange part is that I used to get dreams about strange types of darkness lingering in the house. One would say that my mind was just playing games on me, but hear me out. One time I had a dream, and there was a bunch of children, like B/W, or black and white maybe. the ages of 3 and 6, sitting in our lawn, eating raw meat. Yum. The kids' clothes and bodies were very dirty. They were just devouring the meat that they had in their hands. I woke up feeling weird, but I didn't say anything. I went to the lawn to get some fresh air and saw that there was a trash bag there. Didn't give it much thought and went to the main lounge to eat breakfast. As I was eating, my mother came to me looking a bit uncomfortable. Told me that when she woke up from fair, she found a cluster of meat in our lawn. Like, take a bunch of meat and press it together tightly. That's when I told her about my dream. Both of us were just speechless. Once, 2 of my uncles came to our house. Told them about the paranormal activities. They dismissed it, saying it's just our minds playing games on us. They said paranormal things don't exist in our world. We ended the topic, went to our rooms to sleep. Next morning, they came to us saying, "You were right." We were confused. We asked them what happened. They told us that in the night, both of them experienced that somebody was pulling their blankets. First, they dismissed it, but it kept happening until the entire blanket was pulled off of them. Once the blanket fell to the ground by itself, they knew something was in the room. They didn't want to start anything with them, so they just acknowledged loudly, "Yes, I admit you exist." And then nothing happened after that. And as I mentioned in the post that we used to hear, like, strange sounds at night, one of the sound was a gibberish sound. Like, take 2 papers and rub them together. Apart from this, imagine a sound where you take a pen and forward it through the window railings. This was a common occurrence. Once my father was sleeping. He was woken up by that gibberish sound I mentioned above. When he opened his eyes, just for like 2 or 3 seconds, he saw someone standing beside his bed. He described it as being maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, and its whole face was covered with darkness. Like he couldn't make out where the eyes and the nose are, just a dark being of small height. When he caught a glimpse of it, his first instinct was maybe it's a thief. He used to keep a gun beside his pillow, as we used to live in a secluded property. Picked up the gun, and then he saw that the being ran toward the door. My father sprinted toward it, and this all happened in like 5 or 6 seconds. The door must have been around 6-7 feet away from his bed. When he reached the door, he realized it was closed from the inside. Then the sleep began to wear off and reality set in. If the door was closed from the inside, then it wasn't a thief that just disappeared right now. It was something else. It's important to mention, we did take the help of a spiritual person, and we are Muslim, and just like Christians, have priests that we call alim. This happened because they used to wake my father up at exactly 2:40 a.m. every night, either by making sounds, pulling his toe, or pulling his blanket. He would wake up and look at the time, and it would always be 2:40. This wound up happening for months. Eventually grew tired of it and called an alim. The alim came and confirmed that the house was haunted. He did some spiritual work in the house, told my father that he made an agreement with them. They would not enter the residential property, but they can live in open spaces like the lawn or the pool or the gardens. He hanged some spiritual elements in the house and left. They didn't wake my father up after that day. But they were still present outside. I'd be sitting in my room and catch a glimpse of someone's shadow running outside my window. It was a small figure, like 3 or 4 feet. He'd run very fast and would just vanish. And this also happened with 2 of my other family members. These are the incidents that I can recall, at least. Strange interaction on the plane. So I was returning alone from a plane trip, and after landing, I was waiting for the passengers in front of me to leave. At some point, I stood up and heard someone saying, "Miss, miss, miss." I didn't look back because I didn't think they were even talking to me. However, the person kept calling until I turned around and realized that an elderly woman was speaking to me. She must have been over 70 years old, short gray hair, was well dressed, had very light-colored eyes. I believe she was wearing red lipstick. When I turned and looked at her, realizing she was talking to me, she asked, "How are you getting home?" I replied, "I don't know." Finding the question strange since I'd never seen that woman before, hadn't spoken to her on the plane, I just thought the interaction was weird. My reaction of simply answering, "I don't know," probably with a confused look, felt odd. I quickly turned, I grabbed my suitcase, rushed out of the plane without looking back. I told some close people about it the day it happened. They suggested that maybe she knew me. But she never even introduced herself, didn't say my name, didn't say, "I know you from somewhere." Others thought maybe she needed help, but she didn't ask for help, just that one question. She could have asked the crew for assistance. Maybe she mistook me for someone else, but she kept calling Miss multiple times until I looked. Maybe she wanted to share an Uber. I don't know about you, but I would never ask that from a stranger. This happened last year at the time. I found it strange. I mentioned it to some people and forgot about it, but this year, started seeing stories on social media of people claiming they might have encountered vampires or something like that. Just very ordinary encounters, nothing too mystical. I don't believe in any sort of that, but for some reason those stories triggered my memory and made me think about this incident again. Thinking about it more deeply this year, I realized that while she was calling Miss, and I was just standing there looking forward and waiting for the other passengers to leave, there were many people ahead of me. But in the brief moment I go to look at the elderly woman and answer her, which is less than a minute for sure, suddenly, there was no one left in front of me. I grabbed my suitcase and rushed out of the plane without any obstacles, without having to wait for anyone else. Anyway, I also started thinking about my reaction, just answering, "I don't know," and leaving in a hurry. I could have asked why, but I didn't. I don't know why. Woman wasn't scary or anything. She was just a normal, well-dressed elderly lady with striking blue eyes. I think it was her question that made me want to leave. Sharing a weird ghost story from my childhood. When I was a kid, I lived in the last apartment of a building. There were no units above ours. Despite this, I would often hear strange noises coming from the ceiling. The sounds were typically hurried footsteps, followed by a sudden thud, and what seemed like coins dropping onto the floor. Sounds were almost exactly the same as if they were recorded. One time I even glimpsed a white figure passing by my bed in the same apartment, but it's a story for another time. As a kid, I was too afraid to ask my parents about the source of these noises. I believed that if whatever is causing the sounds heard us talking about it, might come after me. Also, my parents were the type to dismiss my complaints and sweep problems under the rug, so I kept silent the whole time. Years later, as an adult, I just finally moved out and finally confronted my dad about the mysterious sounds. He told me that some poor guy from the building next to ours is being raided by police one day, so he tried to flee by running and jumping into our building's roof. But he failed, then he fell to his death. Matched with the sound pattern I heard every day for years. It's also a sad story. That's because my dad said that the guy was just being arrested for some check-related issues. It wasn't such a big case. It wasn't worth losing his life. Hope he found peace. The Masked Shadow Man. I was in my senior year of high school around 2012. I'd stayed up a bit too late watching Doctor Who. Realizing it was late, I went to go to bed, and in an effort to get comfortable, I rolled over in my bed when I saw what looked like the silhouette of a person. He was wearing a mask and holding a kitchen knife, and both of which weren't silhouetted. The mask looked like an evil cousin of the typical happy and sad theater masks. This one had angry eyes and a large smile. I looked at this thing for what felt like ages, trying to make out what it could be in the dark. Sometimes a pile of clothes looks creepy in the dark. Maybe this was like that. I held my gaze on it as I reached for my lamp, only to see it disappear as I turned on the light. There was just an empty wall. Nothing I could have mistaken for it. I told myself, out of sight, out of mind. I decided I'd just close my eyes, turn off the lights, and throw the covers over myself. Still needed to try and sleep. That's when I felt something thin and blunt pressing into the middle of my back, right where your brow would meet your spine. Pressed harder and harder, not letting up until I couldn't press any harder. My back was arched from the pressure, and I was frozen in fear. People tell me it could have been sleep paralysis. I just have no history of it, and it was also before I even fell asleep. Usually sleep paralysis happens as you wake up, and not as you're getting into bed. Eventually, the pressure let up, and I was able to move again. I immediately got up, turned on the light, and started looking around to see if one of my brothers had pranked me. Well, both were dead asleep. My parents were also dead asleep. There's no sign of anything besides an insane knot in the center of my back. After that, I slept with my closet light on every night to shine a light on that one spot. 2-ish months later, that mask showed its face at the end of my dream, only for me to wake up to the sound of my dad trying to put out a fire in our attic. It was right above my room. Apparently our pipes were frozen, and he had a space heater in the attic trying to warm the pipes. To be safe, he was checking on the space heater every 5 minutes. The fireman said the space heater malfunctioned and proceeded to catch itself and everything around it on fire. Within the 5 minutes, my dad was gone, and it was too big to put it out. All this happened immediately above where I saw that masked shadow person. Never known how to explain all of this, but after we rebuilt the house, I never saw it again. I have had other supernatural experiences, but those were all harmless. This one was my first and most intense one of them all. Don't buy heaters online. Just a solid piece of advice. And clean them. And maybe sage. Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Family vacation last summer. My siblings and I are all in separate condo complexes in Palmetto Dunes. We just spending our nights with our families and our rentals. My older sibling and I are closer to the end of the resort, almost to Leamington. My younger sibling is closer to the center, not far from the security roundabout after the tennis courts and all. It's night, and we all meet at my younger sibling's place for drinks and dessert. She tells us that somebody was knocking at around 2:30 in the morning. Woke her up naturally. She initially thought it was one of her teenage boys who had gone out for whatever reason and forgot the code to get back in, but finds them both sound asleep. The knocking continues. Now scared, she wakes up her husband, and at that point it stops. He gets up to check it out, but finds no one at the door. So they chalk it up to a drunkard just getting the places mixed up. We basically all shrugged our shoulders and thought the same thing. I forgot about the story entirely until I was driving back home. That was a few days later. Here is where it gets weird, to the point of me being spooked now as I type it. It's about 2:45 or so in the morning. I'm having some nightmare, a bad one. I'm with my ex-wife and no one is around, but we're getting along and discussing bills or something in her house. It's a quiet summer night and she decides to go upstairs to take a shower. While she's there, someone starts knocking on her front door. It's loud and it's continuous. Our kids aren't around and I know they're gone for the night for some reason. So I open the door and I find no one there. I erroneously decide to investigate, walking through the side yard and around the back. It was there where I discovered the sliding glass door to the deck open. I yell to my ex that someone's in the house. Then I wake up and someone is literally banging on the condo door. Scared the hell out of me. Instinct kicked in, checked my phone for messages, thinking perhaps one of my sisters is trying to get a hold of me for an emergency. Wake up the wife, then it stops. Go into the kids' bedroom, they're all sound asleep. Finally, I walk quickly to the dining area window and peek out. No one's there. There isn't even a sign of anyone. Front desk area is well lit and it's silent. One would expect it to be at 3 a.m. Next morning, we head back and my sister's story of the knocking at the door right around the same time hit me out of nowhere, sending a huge shiver up my spine. I don't know if it was a real person or a ghost. Hope to never find out. Ghosts and Dream. I just woke up and had to come here to write this. I don't think dreaming about loved ones who've passed is anything new. In fact, I know I often dream of my late father. But I had a very vivid dream last night about others who passed. Others that have passed that I knew, and in the dream, I was sitting with dead people and trying to prove it to myself. It was an indoor 1980s, 1990s style mall. I wasn't really familiar with it. The building was somewhat narrow and crowded. People were rushing around in rows, sort of like traffic on a highway. There were stores, but the order at which shoppers were traversing the grounds was just notable. Strange, but harmless. In fact, it was rather pleasant. They're moving quickly, but there's no shoving or stopping or anything hostile. I easily made it through and was drawn to this elevator table nearby. Turns out it was in the middle of this stretch of some, I guess, like a barrier between the two sections, like a mall barrier. There were trees, plants, and dining tables. It was also tiered. I climbed a few steps to get to it. So I sit next to a man who I knew was dead. He's asking me how I'm doing and what I've been up to and so forth. He passed away in April of 2024, and I knew him as my master teacher from way back in the early 90s. One of us brought up retirement, and I asked him how long he'd been retired for. At this point, I knew that I was speaking with a ghost. He looked at me as if that he knew I was onto him. It wasn't an angry look at all. It was just that I shouldn't have asked what he's going to tell me anyway. Almost as if he had blown his own cover. After turning away and forcing me through silence to ask him again, he said 9 years. As soon as I woke up, I looked him up online. Found that he had retired in 97. This would have made the setting of my dream 2006. Odd as it is, makes sense based on how I was feeling, and how the mall was still alive, and how both of us looked in terms of age. Back to the dream. Adding to the strangeness, there was another man at the table. He was seated across from me. I didn't recognize him, but he was chatting before my conversation with my master teacher. He was very pleasant, and I can vividly remember his face. He was balding with longer, scraggly brown hair in the back, and he wore a big, round, almost 70s style eyeglass. He was very pleasant. Coming to the table while I was talking to my former master teacher was a beautiful woman. I don't mean Instagram hot in air parentheses, or like a young internet model. I mean, this woman was older, and she had smooth caramel skin, big milk chocolate brown eyes, and a beautiful smile. Without a doubt, she took pride in her appearance. She was talking and laughing along the conversation. Now I'm thinking in my head, she's a ghost too. I need to prove it, though. I asked her what her name was. She looked at all the others and chuckled. It was clear that she didn't want to tell me. Just like my master teacher. But she finally did. But I can't remember now what it was. That's where the dream ended, and I woke up and tried to get back into it, and I just couldn't. A Little Visit to Hell. The year's 2018, freshman college. Just got home from a dance practice. It was already 9 p.m. and I really want to sleep. My mom was downstairs and told me to eat before I sleep since it's not good to rest with an empty stomach. I refused. After a few minutes, I changed my clothes, lay down on bed, and just scrolled through my phone for an hour. I didn't realize I fell asleep until I saw myself sleeping. Yeah, I saw myself sleeping. I was shooked when there's a light above my head instantly shines through my eyes. The light was so bright that also the sun will burn. Then I heard a loud man voice. The voice I will never forget. The voice was majestic, that is full of command. The moment I've heard the voice, I instantly knew who it was. It was God. Yep, it was God. And you know what he said? I'll show you what hell looks like. Don't be scared, I'll be with you. And in a snap, I was in a hole, like a black hole, sliding down like it was never ending, and it was pitch black. You can't see anything, but I can feel the heat and it's burning in my skin. Yes, burn. I cried to God and just told him that I can't do it. It hurt so bad. He didn't make the pain last. He made my trip short. In just a blink of an eye, we already made it through hell. Yes, hell. God was beside me, though. I can't see his face. For real. His face was so bright, his wearing a pure white robe, like the cleanest white clothes you could ever see in your entire life. I looked down and saw many people screaming. Yes, can't explain true or throughly, and can't put to words, but one thing is for sure. Hell is a volcano full of people screaming and dying again, and again. Then again, in just the blink of an eye, God and I were in dislocation. Still in hell, but the other side of it. I saw my best friend, my F-best friend, 2 demons beside her eating her. It was such a crucial pain. She was crying and she saw me. She was crying for help. I can't do anything since I was scared, and if you're going to ask me what was demons looked like, damn hell scary. 2 horns, ugly fave. Large vampire teeth. It was monstrous. Literally a monster. I turned to God, hugged him, and told him I don't want this anymore. Oh Lord God, he hugged me. Never felt this kind of peace. After that, I woke up and I can still feel the burning sensation on my skin. That was the moment I knew hell is real. If hell is real, so is God. All I'm saying is if God was right there and your friend's being eaten by demons under any circumstance, I would have been like, hey, could you give me a hand with this? The Shadow Man of the Hoko. The Hoko wilderness in the Pacific Northwest is vast. Its towering trees and twisting trails hiding secrets older than time. Bold thought. Every summer, my family and I hike these trails, embracing the fresh scent of pine and the cool ocean mist rolling in from the coast. It's our tradition, way to escape and connect. But looking back, I wonder if we were ever truly alone. I first noticed something was off in the summer of 2023. We were deep in the forest, hiking along a narrow trail, when I saw my daughter Lily constantly glancing behind us. She wasn't nervous, just watchful. Curious, I finally asked, "Lily, why do you keep looking back?" She barely paused before answering. "To make sure the Shadow Man's still following us." A chill crawled up my spine. "The what?" "The Shadow Man," she said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "He always follows us when we go somewhere. He makes sure we're safe." I turned quickly, scanning the woods. There's nothing there, only the dense forest, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. But then I noticed something else. It was quiet, unnaturally quiet. The birds had stopped chirping. The wind had died. The usual rustling of small animals moving through the underbrush had vanished. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Lily turned back around, facing forward again, and just like that, the sound of the woods returned, as if nothing had ever changed. I swallowed hard. "Lily, how long has this Shadow Man been following us?" She shrugged. "Since forever." Something in her voice made me press further. "Do you remember the first time you saw him?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, when I was little, like 2. My stomach clenched. She had barely been talking in full sentences back then. I tried to remember, had she ever mentioned something like this before? I had vague memories of her pointing at the corners of rooms or staring into dark spaces when nothing should have been there. Back then, I thought it was just a toddler's imagination. I tried to force a laugh and keep things light. "And he never tries to hurt us?" She shook her head. "No, he just watches. He gets closer when it's dark. But he always stops when I turn around." That night, I barely slept. Not because of what she had said, but because of what I saw when I stepped into the back porch, unable to shake the unease settling into my chest. At the edge of the woods, where our backyard met the trees, there was a shape, not a man, not an animal, just a void, darker than the night around it, standing there, watching. And then, as if it knew I had seen it, the night fell silent again. Lily's words echoed in my mind. "He makes sure we're safe." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But I had the sinking feeling that we weren't being protected. We were being watched. Whatever was watching us had been doing it for a very, very long time. FYI, my daughter's name is not Lily, just for the story purpose. Okay. Fair enough. Trail Cam Ghost Lady. Last year in September of 2024, I ventured up the Hoko Ozette Road near the Blue Canyon area to set up some trail cameras. My goal was to capture footage of wildlife, bears and cougars and bobcats, or any noticeable deer. After scouting for the perfect spot, I found a small pull-off along the road and made my way about a mile into the dense woods. I was following various game trails. The air was crisp, filled with that earthy scent of moss and deep foliage. Along the way, I gathered a bunch of chanterelle mushrooms. Is that how you say that? It added a bit of a pleasant bonus to my outing. I eventually found an ideal location. A flat area with good visibility in both directions along a well-used game trail. The forest canopy allowed only slivers of sunlight to break through, casting shifting shadows into the ground. I set up 3 trail cameras, ensuring each was on video mode before just securing my gear and heading back to my truck. A few weeks later, I returned to check the footage. The forest was just as I'd left it, silent and undisturbed. To my surprise, 2 of the cameras had captured nothing at all, while the third had recorded only 4 pictures instead of video. The SD card felt ice cold in my hands as I loaded the images into my laptop in the truck. The first image showed nothing but trees and brush. The second revealed a woman in a long, flowing gown, standing eerily still, clutching an old-fashioned doll in her arms. The fabric of her dress appeared tattered, and her face was obscured by the shadows of her hair. The third image was even more unsettling. She was now facing the camera directly, her lifeless eyes locked onto the lens, the doll held firmly against her chest. The fourth and final picture had returned to this empty forest scene, as if she had simply vanished. Cold shiver ran down my spine. The area was remote. No one should have known where I placed my cameras, let alone be wandering alone in the woods at that hour. I hiked back to the location where she appeared in the pictures. Yet I found no footprints other than my own. The undergrowth was undisturbed, as if no one had even stood there. I took the SD card home and transferred the images to my laptop, not realizing that the simple act would invite something into my life. That night, I began experiencing strange occurrences. I saw shadowy figures moving through my home, heard footsteps echoing in the empty hallways, felt an eerie presence lingering just outside my vision, as if something was watching me. Determined to get answers, I decided to return to the site better prepared. This time, I brought additional trail cameras, perimeter alarms, and chem lights. I set up my hammock in the center of the protective ring of cameras and alarms, carefully making an exit route. The forest felt heavier this time, as if it knew I was there. My plan was to stay overnight and witness whatever was out there firsthand. As darkness settled, the woods fell into an eerie silence. Not even the usual nighttime sounds of crickets and owls filled the air. Armed with my night vision scope, I kept watch, scanning the surrounding trees for movement. The hours passed uneventfully, until just after midnight, when everything changed. A rapid succession of deafening booms filled the air. Boom, 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 relentless and overwhelming. My immediate thought was gunfire, maybe an attempt to scare me off. But as I took a breath and assessed the situation, I realized something far more disturbing. Every single one of my perimeter alarms had triggered at once. A deep, primal fear took hold. My hair stood on end as I grabbed my pack and rifle. I was heading for my exit point. I didn't walk, I ran. The thick brush clawed at me as I sprinted through just all these sticker bushes, stumbling and falling multiple times. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air, but I didn't dare slow down. My only focus was reaching my truck. Bursting through the patch of ferns, I suddenly found myself tumbling into a ditch, chest deep in cold earth. The scent of damp soil filled my nose as I clawed my way out, my pulse hammering in my ears. And finally, through the darkness, I saw my truck gleaming under the moonlight. I reached for the door handle, and then everything went black. The next thing I knew, I'm sitting in the driver's seat. My pack and rifle, which I always stored behind the driver's seat, were inexplicably behind the passenger seat. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. 3 hours had passed, yet I had no memory of what happened. Shaken to my core, I sped home, immediately collapsed into sleep. The exhaustion was overwhelming, as if I'd run for miles. A few days later, I returned one last time to retrieve my remaining equipment. The air felt oppressive, as if the forest itself was warning me to leave. After moving everything from that spot, the strange occurrences at my house stopped. The shadowy figures, the footsteps, the eerie presence, they were all gone. To this day, I don't know who or what appeared on my trail cam, but I do know one thing: won't be going to that spot again. Haunted restaurant. So this started around 2020. My dad worked at a restaurant in a hotel called the Barn in Hockley Heath. It had a Premier Inn attached to it, and around the back building was a staff house for the workers who had nowhere to stay. This is how I met one of my friends. She used to sleep over to visit her dad at the time as me. Yeah, I know, I screwed up. The staff house halls were creepy, and there used to be this laundry room that we would hang out in. All sorts of spooky stuff used to happen in there. The lights would turn off on their own, and we would hear creaking. We even heard a clown-like laugh once. In 2022, I got a part-time job there as a waiter. And one night, as we were just closing up, I went into this long, narrow storage closet to grab some forks. And as I was walking back out, I walked into a little boy who would have been walking into the closet. I said, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there." It then clicked in my head that he shouldn't be in there, so I turned back around to say something and he was gone. Only one exit through that closet and I was standing in the way. There's a part of the restaurant where it's protected by some sort of spirit. I'll get to that later on. The restaurant had burned down twice. The section that had survived both times was like this tiny bit made from wood, and in that area, a lady who was staying in the Premier Inn had hung herself. Later in the year, I had moved to a cleaner and... My dog's crying at me. Shush. Come on. Later in the year, I had moved to a cleaner and receptionist in that hotel. And when you went to clean the room, that woman who hung herself was staying in when she offed herself. Anything you cleaned would be messed up again. Handprints on the mirror, an imprint of a human on the bed, the water turning on, etc. The restaurant closed down a couple of months ago due to some circumstances, but now it's just the Premier Inn. Ghost train. All my life, I'd been obsessed with trains. So, in my photography classes, topic for the month was transportation. I knew I wanted to get photos of trains. For a little background, all my life I've lived and currently still do live in this house that is right next to a train track. It's owned by the Norfolk Southern, so they're the only trains that go through. Background over. Past couple of days I've been going through these tracks and waiting around for around 2 hours on average for a train to appear over the horizon. Because the way that certain track works, one direction is 3-mile straight track. The other way has a railroad crossing. And this will be important later. Eventually a train will go by. I'll get my photos and I'll go home. But last night, I got really upset over a girl. Just my friend groups in general, or something in the back of my mind wanted to go to the train track and just relax. Keep in mind, this was 12:30 a.m. But anyway, I walk up there, and the homeless lady that's been kind of staying near the tracks for the past 2 weeks was gone. So I was completely alone. Only a street light to light the way. But I could see fine. I sit in the tracks, and immediately my head just starts throbbing. I get super dizzy. I repositioned myself, and it went away. Then I thought, hey, I saw this thing where if you put your ears to the rail, you can see if a train's coming. So I did this, and I heard the loudest train noise in my life. It sounded like the train was right next to me. My head started throbbing, and I started getting dizzy again. I then got off the tracks and stood there for a second. Thought to myself that I was probably just hearing things. Go back on the tracks, and I started getting really emotional. Felt as if something was watching me. Then the throbbing and dizziness happened again. Actually almost fell and passed out on the tracks. I immediately hopped off the tracks and tried to call my friends to tell them what happened. Only one picked up. Told him what happened and he completely understood. Started walking home, him on the call. Began to hear quiet train horns in my head. That's when I told him I was going to try randonauting. Randonauting. And see if the topic I chose would lead me to the train tracks. I thought of my quote-unquote destiny, and wouldn't you know it, at the roundabout location, it was in the local train yard. Went home with my friend still on the call and told him I wanted to show him something. I got this fortune card when I was a freshman in high school. didn't really believe in it until some of the first things on it started to come true. But the last thing it says in the fortune card is, "Beware railroad crossings," which has always stuck out to me. Like I said, I've always been close to the train tracks. There is a railroad crossing right up the tracks from where all this happened. This is the end of the story. I know it's a bit choppy and I'm not the best at storytelling, but it's what happened. And it really creeped me out when it did happen. Inexplicable incidents I've experienced. 1. Circa 1989. The first involved a Ouija board-like setup. It was one in which me and a friend had been using. One day, another friend joined us who was doubtful of such things. In order to put it to the test, we suggested that he ask a question to the board to which only he would know the answer to. His question was, "What was my brother's name?" My friend and I were immediately confused as we knew him to only have one female sibling. However, the glass duly began to move to various letters spelling out a name. Our friend was visibly taken aback. The answer was correct. Apparently, before both he and his sister were born, his mother had actually given birth to a boy, who unfortunately only lived for a few days. We also asked the whereabouts of the dead brother's resting place. The answer was correct. Though, to be fair, the board had spelled out the name of our town's main cemetery, so it was no great revelation. 2. Circa 1998. One early afternoon, whilst just packing up my apartment in readiness to move home, I sat down on the couch to grab a smoke. As I sat there, my attention was quickly drawn towards movement from above the fireplace. The large mirror installed above it was pulling itself away from the wall by one side. It reached an impossible point where it was perpendicular to its original placing, then crashed to the floor. On hearing the commotion, my landlady, who ran to the newsagents downstairs, bolted up to my flat to check if I was okay. In response, all I could think of was to say, "I don't think somebody wants me to leave." I should say in no way do I consider myself to be a quote-unquote sensitive, because if anything, during my time there, to me the apartment actually felt sterile. Circa 2000. I was staying with a friend on a weekend stay. On a Saturday morning, I'd woken early and breakfasted. Having a few hours to spare whilst my friend was working, I returned to my bedroom and laid on the bed reading. Having nodded back off to sleep, I was awoken to what felt like a dog had jumped up on the bed and was clumsily attempting to walk over my legs. Disturbingly, I seemed unable to open my eyes as whatever was on the bed was seeming to move up and be standing uncomfortably heavy on my chest. In response, I sat up forcibly, able then to open my eyes, finding myself alone in the room. My friend had no dog or other pets, but on this occasion, as strange as it was, actually turned out to be the first of several incidents of sleep paralysis. Never accounting for the old hag, which many fellow sufferers experience, my last experience involved falling asleep in a field and imagining a large donkey suddenly sitting down on me, and then forcing myself upright to being awake. No such donkey was anywhere near me. This final experience seemed to assuage any supernatural doubts I had regarding my experiences. 4. 2001, shortly after my mother passed away, coincidentally on September 11, 2001. I had a dream about her, in which I was crying very hard. In this dream, I was bawling so hard that whatever I was wearing began to feel restricted around my neck and it was choking me. I then recall looking up at my mother's face. It seemed to show a loving concern, and at that point I awoke with a start, crying and choking as the cord of the dressing gown I'd fallen asleep wearing had become tightly wrapped around my neck, It was as though she saved me before I choked to death. 5. Circa 2003-2004. One evening after returning home from an evening at a bar, a close friend and I were sat in his lounge chatting. At one point, not really paying too much attention, out of the corner of my eye I vaguely registered a massive passing presence on my right. Seemingly had walked through the lounge and then exited the room through a doorway. A doorway which led to the stairway, which led upstairs to the bedrooms. I asked my friend, which, if that was his son, he may have been returning to bed upstairs after perhaps visiting the bathroom. My friend had also noticed the exact same dark mass as being passed by us. I just assumed the same thing. However, at that point we both came to the realization that nobody had previously come past us in the opposite direction of the bathroom. So, mystified, I went to the bottom of the stairs and called up to my friend's son, only to hear loud snores in response. Comparing what we both absent-mindedly noticed as our fault, attention was elsewhere with each other. Both of us could only describe as noticing a dark presence and mass passing through the room past us. Next day, we asked my friend's son if he'd come down, perhaps passing us to use the bathroom. Well, he hadn't. And interestingly, the house had been built by a bizarre religious sect for some of its followers as part of the Jezreel's tower grounds. More information regarding this fascinating, though now long-gone addition to the Gillingham skyline. 6. One evening upstairs from the bar, I was helping to run my boyfriend and I. One evening upstairs from the bar, I was helping my boyfriend run. I thought we'd test drive the Buffy the Vampire Ouija board I'd just had delivered. We'd only started using it when suddenly there was a violent explosion of plaster across the room from above the room's window pane. Don't recall any other events that evening, and on a few occasions we've attempted to use it since it kind of proved fruitless. 7 through 8. 2 inexplicable incidents occurred in my last home. I was alone in the flat. I was sat in bed watching the large-screen TV at the bed's bottom, when suddenly it was as though someone behind the appliance had given it a hard punch. The last instant I experienced was also when I sat in bed, and from right next to me, clear as day, I heard someone or something cough loudly into my left ear. Again, I was alone in my flat. The corner that gave me nightmares. As a kid, when I was 4 or 5, I had my own room with a relatively big flat of my parents. The room basically had an upside-down L shape. Just imagine the Tetris block. At the time, I slept in the very top, sort of the right side of the room, which kid me decided was getting annoying due to me not being able to see around the corner, but still out of the window at least, which, as cliché as it sounds, leads to the back of a cemetery. At least I believe it was one. Which never really terrified me, though. What did bother me, though, was not being able to see around the corner of the room. I would usually see weird things just lurking around that corner, which I believed to be typical night fears usual for kids at the time. I decided to move my bed so I could look down both the ways, as I know that there are no monsters. Clever, I know. In the following 4 nights, yes, exactly 4, I had horrible nightmares, only one of which I can remember vividly. So on the next night, I decided that I would move the bed back to its original place while the imaginary monsters now were there again. The nightmares weren't, and I slept very good there till we moved. And to note, I wasn't a really scared kid, and not really loud in the nights compared to other kids and even babies, according to my parents at least. Which makes it weird that my parents told me that I'd screamed in the last night I stayed in that corner that viewed both ways, which I don't remember. And apparently I cried heavily, which I do remember. I know this might not have anything really to do with the paranormal, maybe more with the evolving human mind. But it's definitely only one of the few memories I have when I was young. I believe the term is core memory. Correct me if I'm wrong. Paranormal things happened to me and my family when I was a child. So up to my 6-year-old, my family, me, mom, dad, little brother. We were living in a 5-story apartment building that was constructed by the banks. It'll come in handy later. We were the last apartment from the top, so no other apartments are above us, just the building's roof. And it was the first apartment we lived in before we moved to another one. Since I became 16 years old or so, when I asked my mom about the apartments we lived in, she would always tell paranormal things that happened to me. Not just me, her too. Always in that first apartment. And for instance, Mom recalls when I was a baby. Couldn't walk or talk at that stage, but in the coldest nights she would dress me up in the coziest narrow-headed and hard-to-wear wool clothes, then put me to my bed. But to her surprise, find me in the morning naked in the ground and all the wool clothes are off me, which a baby can't take it off by himself. I even remember when I was 4th grade, I struggled wearing this kind of wool clothes and I needed help wearing it and taking it off. This phenomenon continued to happen to me until Mom bought a necklace that has Ayatul Kursi engraved on it, a verse we believe it protects from jinns. Just after all of that was all gone, we moved when we got the money to do so. Maybe they played with me, I don't know. My mom would also recall I'm not very good at these types of words. My mother would also recall at F-A-J-R. How do you say that? Fajr? I don't know. Well, my mom would also recall at this prayer timer, which was very early in the morning, my dad would go to pray. She'd be alone in the apartment, along with me, when I was a little child, because I don't recall that. She would hear a lot of heavy sounds of cats and dogs barking, coming up from above while there's nothing above us except the sky. Not even a building is close to us that the noise could come from it. Also, my mom recalled seeing a little girl in the middle of the hallway just standing there. But my mom ignored it because, as she says, she wants to show that she isn't afraid of them, otherwise the jinn will harass her more. The last thing I remember about this apartment, but unsure of, is if it's related to the things above. When I was 6 years old, my mom and dad went to the pharmacy, left me and my little brother in the home, but they locked us in their room, so we don't ourselves. And we have this calendar that had this second picture of a family giving each other presents. So when my mom and dad leave, the family in the second picture started to turn around, looked me in the eye, and smile in a very scary way. I then ran and hid in the wardrobe, but my brother stood in his place bluntly, not even caring about what I did. Whenever I peek through the wardrobe doors, the people in the picture will do the same. I was so scared I went into drama mode and knocked everything in my parents' disc to the ground. LOL. My mom's explanation for all of this is, when this area was constructed by banks, it was left empty for a long time until it was up for sale. Thus, people who committed crimes threw bodies here. Even after people moved to the area, my mom recalls that people in the nearby buildings would find bodies in their entrance until they made the area lit by lights all the night, so the area was filled with spirits. Yikes. Moved in the middle of the night. This is my first memory. Must have been around 1.5 to 3, young enough to have still been sleeping in a crib. I was put to bed that night after a normal day. Nothing out of the ordinary, I remember. I was old enough to have not been fussing through the night. Normally slept pretty well. I do remember having a strange dream that night, though. And for preface, my entire life, all of my dreams have been first-person perspective. But this one was strange because this dream was from the point of view of somebody standing above the crib, staring down at me while I slept. I remember waking up once, but going back to bed. No dream this time. Right before I drifted off, however, vaguely remembered dark figure standing in the corner of my room, right behind the door. That was as I was drifting off. I continued to sleep as normal. I was woken up again, except this time I was under the crib. Initially, I didn't freak out because I was a little bit of an adventurous kid. I liked climbing on, around, and under stuff, especially my parents' bed. So I thought I probably climbed under there somehow. I then went to climb back into my crib, but I realized I was stuck. It was a very low crib made out of some thick wood, and I couldn't squeeze any part of myself beside my arms underneath the crib. My head was too big to have gotten under there without someone lifting the crib for me. So as a child would normally do, I started screaming for my dad. After a few minutes, he came and saved me from my strange predicament. He asked me how I'd gotten under there, to which I responded, "I don't know, I just woke up there." Put me back in the crib for the rest of the night, and I do remember him saying something along the lines that he was scared somebody had broken in. That was the end of that story. You probably doubt that my memory of this is so clear because I was a toddler, and it happened decades ago. But I assure you this is the truth. Me and my dad still joke about it sometimes. A few years after the incident, I assumed it was all just an elaborate joke. So I asked him about it. Says that he has positively no idea how I got under there. It's a bit of a family urban legend at this point. I always tried to make sense of it in my head by saying it was just my, habit of sleep, moving, or talking. But I've never sleepwalked. Only little movements in the night. Nothing strong enough to get me out of the crib. I literally needed to be lifted out at age 2. One paranormal factor that may have been playing some sort of a part was that the house was about 90 years old at that point, and that while my family was remodeling it, found a bunch of construction workers' items in the walls. Never really had an experience like this after this time. No-faced people, Minnesota. Anyone seen them? I live in Minnesota. I've seen 2 faceless people in the last year and a half. Here are my sightings. Nilaka, Minnesota Pink Jacket Lady, 2024. Outside of an old folks' home in Nilaka, Minnesota. My coworkers came inside, and she was an ex-Marine, not easily scared. I was in the bathroom when she came in, and when she did, she was yelling stuff I couldn't even make out. But I could tell that she was scared, so I got out fast because I was so scared. When I got out, she kept saying, I seen a person with black. Continues to wave her hand over her face, for her head to chin repeatedly. No face at all, black. She had no face, sitting right by my truck. I got scared, I couldn't say anything. I always say something, what the fuck was I so scared? She was breathing heavily. She runs to the nearest window, screams my name to run, and when I get over there to the window, there she is looking at the ground about 6 or 10 seconds after I get to the window. She looks up at us and immediately dashes to the building across the street. The coworker then runs to the door outside. I go to the door yelling at her to get back in. I don't want to find out, and she says no, keeps walking, and then goes. Come right here right now. Now, this still is a sight I will never forget. This woman in a pink jacket was hunched all the way over, hands hanging down on the ground like a pillhead, looking for something on the ground, but absolutely zero movement. Completely still. Not a bone, muscle, move an inch. She stayed with her arms stretched toward the ground, her torso hunched over, her head looking right at the ground. I ran back inside. Then they were all men in all black with faces, but that's a different story for CC. I have seen alive people like that on a particular substance. Not scary, but heartbreaking. Omania, Minnesota Woodland Cemetery, 3-1-25. Gray and black hoodie, This is a nice short one, as it was a briefer meeting, I suppose if that's what you call this. But I was on my way up to work in a Brainerd. Oh, maybe that's a place. And that's when I was passing the casino. But something kind of had me look to my left, and I never do. I never even knew there was a cemetery across the street from the casino. But when I did, there was a man with a gray and black hoodie. It had been striped, with black gloves, black pants and shoes, and hood up, and all black faceless face. Nothing there. Just pacing the entrance of the cemetery back and forth. He looked right at me, then continued to pace, and I didn't even turn around. I didn't even look back. Try to pay it no mind, just need to know if anyone else has been seeing anything like this. Even something remotely similar. Sweet dreams.